The third step would be above at the ovule. An ovulate cone scale has 2 ovules, each containing a sporangium. Only 1 ovule is shown. Step 4 would be the megasporite. Pollination occurs when a pollen grain reaches the ovule. The pollen grain then germinates, forming a pollen tube that slowly digests its way through microsporangium. Step 5 is after meiosis, the surviving megaspore. While the pollen tube develops, the megasporocyte undergoes meiosis, producing 4 haploid cells. 1 survives a megaspore. Stage 6 would be the archegonian of the female gametophyte. The megaspore develops into a female gametophyte that consists of 2 or 3 archegonia, which is where the area for an egg. Step 7 would be the sperm nucleus, the pollen tube, or the egg nucleus. By the time the eggs are mature, 2 sperm cells have developed into pollen tubes, which extends the female gametophyte. Fertilization occurs when the sperm and egg nuclei unite. Step 8, after fertilization. Fertilization usually occurs more than a year after pollination. All eggs must be fertilized, but usually only 1 zygote develops into an embryo. The ovule becomes a seed and consists of an embryo, food supply, and seed coat. After that, your seeds drop to the floor and mature into a sporophyte. The gymnosperm, which is the pine tree, life cycle takes about 2 years to complete. The dominant photosynthetic part of the life cycle is the sporophyte, the spore-producing part. The pine cones have the pine's specialized reproductive elements where meiosis, process of division where the number of chromosomes are halved, takes place. Pollen grains are produced by male cones and contain the male gametophyte. When pollen is released, it is carried by the wind in the female cones. The cones close until the following year. The closing of the cones allows for the pollen to germinate and produce pollen tubes that grow within the female gametophyte. When the sperm cell and the egg cell fuse, they form a new sporophyte. This sporophyte develops into an embryo and closes in a seed. This seed is later released and carried off by the wind to germinate once again. Furthermore, pine pollen can travel great distances with wind's aid. When pollination begins in the spring, the pollen tube starts to grow towards the mega-gametophyte, the female gametophyte that arises from the megaspore. There, eventually, the goal is the egg. However, the egg has not yet differentiated, according to gymnosperm phyla. In fact, many parts of the reproductive process do not yet exist in this life cycle. The megaspore, the mother cell, the main spore, has not yet divided. The mega-gametophyte and the archegonia, the multicellular organ, do not exist. While it may appear that the fact that the reproductive structures listed above have not differentiated is a problem, the life cycle of the gymnosperm is not affected. This is because it takes the pollen tube more than a year to make its way through the tissues to the archegonia, and this year is enough for development of the mega-gametophyte. The following year, the eggs of the archegonia are fertilized and form polyembryony, and the development of the next generation sporophyte begins.
Gymnosperms. They are dominated by the sporophyte, the seed-producing plants that include conifers, cycads, ginkgo, and Metalius. They're also known as the naked seeds. They have 2 different cones, the male and the female. The male cones contain the pollen, and the female cones are the seeds. And the pollen gets in the female parts by wind, and it's not carried by animal pollination. The vascular tissues are xylem and phloem. The xylem is the water and mineral transport from roots to aerial parts of the plant, and the phloem is the transportation of food and nutrients such as sugar and amino acids from leaves to storage organs and growing parts of plants. One type of gymnosperm is the Cycadophyta. They have large cones and they are palm-like leaves. They are very abundant during the Mesozoic and they have a flagellated sperm. The central cone is where the pollen is. The next one is Ginkgophyta, and this phylum consists of single ginkgo biloba, and they have flagellated sperms. This phylum consists of a single living species. The Cnidophyta, is located in tropical to desert species. There are about 70 species across the 3 genera. I don't know how to pronounce those. The 4th one is Coniferophyta. There are about 600 species. The members of this group produce ovules that mature into seeds. An example is evergreens, sequoia, the southern longleaf pine, and the Douglas fir. Angiosperms are the flowering plants. They are vascular plants with flowers that produce seeds enclosed in an ovule. They're the most diverse and widespread of all extant plants. A plant that contains both male and female anatomy is known as the perfect flower, whereas a flower that contains only male or only female anatomy is called an imperfect flower. The key features are flowers and fruits. The female parts of a flower are the pistil, stigma, style, and the ovary. The pistil produces the ovules, the stigma is where the pollen attaches, and the ovary is where the ovules are housed. The male parts are the stamen, the anther, and the filament. Stamen produces pollen, the anther is the site of pollen production, and the filament is the stalk. The petals are just brightly colored and they attract the pollinators, and the sepal encloses the flower. There are 4 types of angiosperms. There is basal angiosperms, magnolids, monocots, and eudicots. The basal angiosperms are the first flowering plants to diverge from the ancestral egg formation in Amborella. It resembles gymnosperms. They have pollen, seeds, and fruit. An example is a water lily. Magnolids have about 9,000 species of flowering plants, including magnolias, nutmeg, cinnamon, avocado, and black pepper. They're mostly characterized by the trimerous flowers, pollen with 1 pore, and they're usually branching, veined leaves. Okay.
Monocots are an embryo with a single cotyledon. Their pollen is with a single furrow or pore. Flower parts are multiples of 3. Their major leaf veins are parallel. The stem vascular bundles are scattered. Roots are adventitious, and the secondary growth is absent. On eudicots, the embryo has 2 cotyledons. Pollen has 3 furrows or more. The flower parts are multiples of 4 or more. The major veins are reticulated. The stem vascular bundles are in a ring. The roots develop from radicle, and the secondary growth is often present.
And that's it. Thanks for listening.